Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. 6 years ago, a vice president at Bellevue College instructed someone to alter the artist description of a campus mural. It depicted the incarceration of Japanese American children during World War II. That incident led to the resignation of 2 Bellevue administrators, including the college's president. Now, Bellevue College is rededicating that mural permanently. Coming up, we'll talk with Seattle artist Aaron Shigaki. But first, let's get you caught up. The Seattle City Council is voting on 2 immigration enforcement-related bills today. The first would stop immigration enforcement activities on city property. The second would keep some personal data private. The meeting starts at 2 p.m. The King County Council is voting to reaffirm its support of entheogenic-related research and decriminalization. Entheogenic substances are psychoactive plants and fungi like psilocybin or ayahuasca tea. This vote would support their use and experimentation in therapeutic, research, spiritual, and limited personal contexts. That council meeting starts at 1:30 p.m. And Governor Bob Ferguson is signing more bills today. On the schedule, 11 bills, including SB 6084 about election integrity. The bill will clarify that voting twice in one Washington election or in Washington and another state for the same election is a felony. That starts at 4 p.m. today. We're back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. A mural on the campus of Bellevue College depicts 2 Japanese American children in a U.S. government incarceration camp during World War II. 6 years ago, a Bellevue College vice president instructed someone to erase information about anti-Japanese agitation by influential East Side businessman Miller Freeman, whose family is still prominent in Bellevue today. A sentence in the artist description that included the Freeman name was covered up with whiteout. Soon after, the VP and Bellevue College's president both resigned. Now, Bellevue College is permanently rededicating the mural, which was created by Seattle artist Aaron Shigaki. She helped rededicate the work at an event last week at Bellevue College.
This is an opportunity for the college to do right, not just by her art, but to do right by what her art represents on our campus.
That's Bellevue College President David May, who's led the school since 2023.
The incarceration in internment camps is a deep and abiding stain on the history of this country. And we cannot shy away from the place that the Pacific Northwest and the city of Bellevue played in that. Those historic realities matter.
The mural will be installed May 14th. Artist Aaron Shigaki joins me now to talk about it. Aaron, glad you're here. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about your mural, Never Again Is Now. For people who haven't seen it, describe it.
Yes, it is from a Dorothea Lange photo. She was hired by the government and decided to take pictures, especially as folks were moving into those first camps, prison camps, detention centers, whatever language you like. I really am moved by those photos because they capture the real sense of anxiety and fear. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know for how long. They had just given everything up.
So you specifically chose children. Let's talk about why.
Our country really still needs to reckon with the fact that we put children in jail. We have been putting children in jail and separating families since chattel slavery, Indian boarding schools, Japanese American incarceration, which is my focus, and then now, in these detention centers, huge complexes that ICE is continuing to build out. And I really feel like it's all part of the same chain of decision-making of state violence that this country is kind of obsessed with. And I'm really dedicated to trying to end these cycles.
Okay, so that's the work. Let's talk about what happened.
The piece had been up for less than a week. And I knew from putting up an earlier piece of public art about the topic, as well, having some work kind of secretly censored at Bellevue City Hall 6 months earlier, that I really needed to insist on putting an interpretive panel, like some short piece of writing to go with the imagery so that people who cared to know more could learn more. And so that's what the vice president whited out. She whited out a factual sentence about the so-called forefather of Bellevue, Miller Freeman, who had been anti-Asian, agitating in the newspapers he'd owned for decades. And there was a land grab, when Japanese American farmers on the east side were forcibly removed. All of a sudden, Miller Freeman ends up with all this land, and that's the land that we, now know as Bellevue Square in downtown Bellevue.
Did you think that this was controversial when you put it up?
Yeah, to be honest, Patricia, I knew that there was a touchiness around speaking that family name. And furthermore, we know from various oral histories that are kept at places such as Densho, which is based in Seattle, that folks really felt strongly that the Freeman family were not their friends. They were against their success as farmers. And, of course, they knew about all of this anti-Asian, which was specifically anti-Japanese at that moment, sentiment coming from that man.
What were you thinking when you learned the work had been defaced? What did you do?
It was awful. It was a hard time for me. I knew that I was pushing something. I knew that I was poking the bear, but it was 2020. And I thought, so what's happening is American history that had been censored, for years upon years is being censored again. Like, my work to tell the story is being censored. Like, what's going on here? Who is benefiting from this protection? Who are we as Americans if we're going to let this keep happening?
Now the college is rededicating your mural permanently. Let's talk about that. How did that come together?
I was a little bit surprised. I think that the original group of Asian American administrators and teachers on the campus have tried to keep pushing for things to happen around Asian American studies and around education, around, for this story. And furthermore, that original paper mural somehow has stayed on the wall.
It was not intended to?
No.
Wow.
It was intended to be temporary, 6 months at most.
Wow.
Yeah, they had not started putting up murals on those structures before then. But for some reason, because it's protected, or perhaps there's some divine intervention, the mural is still up. It's a little bit ratty, but it's there.
Really keeps it top of mind for people as well.
Yeah, I have to say I'm very grateful that it has stayed up, because it has stayed, if not, exactly in the way we want it to be doing, it's stayed in the consciousness of people in that community.
We should remind listeners that the VP who defaced your mural has resigned, and so did Bellevue College's president. Let me ask you how the college rebuilt trust with you over the last 6 years. Do you think that this was taken seriously beyond the resignation?
I think Gary Locke also helped move the needle during his time.
Former Washington governor.
Exactly, when he was a temporary president of Bellevue College. But, I went back and spoke to the students a couple of years later for Day of Remembrance, which commemorates the signing of Executive Order 9066. And those kids didn't know about it. Like, there hadn't been any teaching around it where this tool is right there in front of them that could be plugged in so easily, including what happened, and the consequences. So, I think that the trust building is still in process. I feel a little bit surprised that a permanent piece is going in, but I'm going to go forward because that's, this is my calling.
Is it meaningful to you?
Yeah, it's meaningful that a permanent piece is going up. It's meaningful because survivors of the incarceration, such as my dad, they're still with us. I am surrounded by a strong community of people who survived that experience. And I know that my two grandmothers were willing to speak about their time in these prison camps when I was, a teenager in 8th grade, because they wanted something more to come from it. They wanted the truth to come out. They were tired of being silent. They really recognized that not enough people stood up for the Japanese American community during that time. And so that's my calling now, not only to tell our story and to provide healing for my immediate community, but to really try to encourage people to get in the streets and or stand up in any way you can now for what's happening.
You mentioned how you hope that maybe Bellevue College would take a step towards using this as an educational piece. Now that it's a permanent installation, what is your hope for how people experience it or learn from it?
Well, we're going to expand it a little bit. We're going to add more interpretation to the piece. The image of the children will be more or less the same, except the image of the children will be fabricated in metal. And I hope that American history or cultural studies programs will take advantage of this piece of art right there. And there's so many ways to dig into the story, and it's such a interesting, tragic piece of American history that we haven't quite unlearned. So I think it will be really useful for the educators at Bellevue College.
It's relevant today, you think, as well?
100% relevant. It's 100% on that chain of atrocities incarcerating Black and brown bodies.
Do you have concerns it may be defaced again?
Sure, it may be. My work in the International District gets defaced all the time. I think some of it's really intentional, and I think some of it is general displeasure with the moment. But I think people are uncomfortable with those of us who are trying to strongly change the narrative, strongly change things up.
Erin Shigaki is an artist based in Seattle. Her mural, Never Again Is Now, will be permanently rededicated by Bellevue College. Erin, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
We did reach out to Kemper Development Company to hear their thoughts on this mural being permanently rededicated, but we didn't hear back. Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now. Thanks to our generous donors for your financial support. Take a minute to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. Today's episode was produced by Andy Hurst. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tonight for Evening Headlines.